Today's episode is sponsored by our friends at Ian's Display Accessories, the best figure stands for vintage as well as modern action figures. Shipping nationwide, as well as our friends at TGC Customs. Hey, why don't you get the retro version 1 style weapons for your classified action figures? Shipping nationwide. Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Codename YouTube 2. Hi, I'm your presenter, Shibu Are You. Well, this evening I anticipated dropping the comic recap for issue number 296, but there's been a little bit of change of plans. I got a delivery that came through. I wasn't expecting it by yesterday, or was it Fridays when I ordered it. But hey, it came here on Sunday, so I figured I'd go ahead and take a look at this character. Now, unlike some of these other toy reviewers, that didn't give G.I. Joe the light of day several years ago, now that they're doing classified, now they're doing, recap. But guys like me, Hooded Cobra Commander, Half the Battle, Joe Motion, G.I. Joeberg, 3D Joes, Peg Warmers. We've been producing content even when there was no G.I. Joe. There was nothing going on. And when I do a toy look at, we also look at the comic Mythos. So I would like to do a little bit of a deep dive and bring in some of the IDW lore, the Marvel lore. So when we look at a figure, it's not just looking at a toy. It's looking at the character, kind of like 360 degrees, just to make that experience a lot more fun. Now, Stalker is a character that is beloved by everybody. From the beginning opening sequence of the Sumbo series, when he's in his jump jetpack and throwing the dynamite in the air and shooting it, it's like he just captivates the mind. He's the point man for much of the Marvel run, especially when Hawk was in charge. So, Duke pretty much took over that once he was introduced, but my point man is always going to be Stalker, and I just love the guy so much. Now, not only are we going to look at the figure itself, but I want to pay particular attention to issue number 251, which we recapped a while back. This, was several years ago. But it's such an important issue as far as the complete picture of Stalker, where he came from, what he's dealing with, and how he goes about moving forward. Especially if you're a veteran or you're dealing with PTSD, it really hits home. I mean, there were times that you had to read the thing and kind of take a deep breath because you could relate to what Stalker is going through. Now, everybody knows that issue number 26 and 27 pretty much is told through Stalker's point of view about, the long-range patrol unit of Vietnam. But I would also recommend picking up issue number 286, which is basically the backstory. And we talked about it in other episodes if you haven't watched. But we talked about how Tommy Arashikage joined the army, joined that particular unit in Vietnam, and it was told through Stalker, who was kind of conveying the story to Scarlet. So this is another important book of Stalker is just great at telling stories and the past and stuff like that. And I think that's what Larry Hama utilizes him as someone that connects the past to the currently what's going on. So he has an integral part in the whole A Real American Hero story arc. So that's another reason. So I mentioned issue number 251, and we'll go into it a little bit, but I would recommend watching that episode for a deep dive, and you'll thank me for it, believe me. But this is the John Royal cover, which is suddenly John Royal has become hot. I've been saying this for the longest time, but now ever since that issue number 295 dropped with the Baroness cover, everybody wants to get John Royal cover. So this one's actually going off to grading. And I featured it on Instagram and Facebook because of the beautiful cover girl, and you have Stalker here. But this is a Stalker Untold Tales issue, through and through. And it is a fantastic issue. Whether you're a Marvel only, if you want to read one IDW you'll thank me. Read this one. This is phenomenal. As well as the next one, issue number 252, and I think that was the Baroness's backstory, and then I think 253 was Scarlet's backstory. Kind of like what she's going through post the death of Snake Eyes. But this is a great, great read by far. Oh, and also, just to let my viewers know what is playing in the background. Well, we have Tokyo Extreme Racing from the Dreamcast. So this was before Gran Turismo, and this was primarily a Japanese game that got ported into Dreamcast at the very end. And just to get this game right here, if you want to buy the original game, you're talking about 40 to 70 bucks, I forget, but it is up there for a used game. It's fun still. It's kind of funny how, you know, when you play Gran Turismo, because I love those racing games. But this one, you know, you get all those iconic Japanese cars that we grew up in the 90s drooling over. So this is a cool game to get. All right, so without further ado, let's take a look at Classified Stalker. All right, so you got to begin with the 1982 version 1 of Stalker, and then the following year you got the swivel arm. But the cool thing is that Stalker was actually the first person recruited to this newly formed G.I. Joe team. And, you know, his mythos is that, you know, he was part of these real horrible gangs in Detroit, and he saw 2 of his brothers killed, so he enlisted to get away from that violence. So, you know, that's kind of crazy, you know, going from street gangs and then you go to Vietnam to escape violence. I mean, think about that. But he is more than the token black guy. You know, he is somebody that is so beloved by everybody, and it carries on to this day. And I think with the classifieds, they're basically trying to modernize this iconic look. Now, there's been several versions of Stalker. People forget that. You know, they'll think of probably just 2 versions of Stalker. But actually there was 4 versions, and what makes Stalker special is he was, you know, the first year of G.I. Joe, and he was also there for the last year of G.I. Joe. So from beginning to end, you know, people think, you know, maybe Snake Eyes, yes, Snake Eyes was there and Stalker was there from beginning to end. There was 2 characters that booked in this iconic franchise. So next, of course, and I'm going to just put up some of the other versions. Now, the version number 2 was a mail-away offer, what became a mail-away offer, and that pretty much lasted for the entire iteration of the mail-away offer. And then there was another mail-away. So Stalker was actually featured in 2 mail-away offerings for Hasbro. And of course, you know, the Arctic Commandos was the second one. But that's another thing that Stalker had. He was featured in 2 mail-away offers. And then we're going to switch to the modern. And I have this retro, the Walmart retro. Ironically, Stalker was probably the last in this much controversial Walmart retro 4-inch figure set. So he was the last one, and then Hasbro decided to throw that down the crapper. But this is another great modern update to that iconic classic figure. And for shits and giggles, we have the card back here for that. So I have 2 versions of Stalker. So let's take a look at this card back. And I'll bring up the version 1 as well over on the side. But again, this is a good modern update of that iconic card back. And again, the as I call it, the chicken wing without the meat file card. So, basically we know that his role as a ranger, infantry, medic, and interpreter. I think those are 2 demanding secondary specialties to have. You got to be someone with extreme intelligence to be able to be medical as well as a different language. So Stalker is definitely a role model for a lot of minorities. He is someone that, he's athletic, He is intelligent. You know, like Montreal Royal, who is he played for the Tennessee Titans, and then he went off to med school. So there's another example of like you could be brains and brawn at the same time. So anyway, we're done with that. Now let's take a look at the classified figure. All right, so here we have the box art for Stalker. All right, I'm going to take a long shot, but I think the box art is supposed to be an homage to Ernie Barnes. Now, you want to know who Ernie Barnes is? You remember the show Good Times? At the very end, they would have that, I think it's called Sugar Snack or Sugar Sack, something like Sugar something. But anyway, that's a really famous painting. So I think that's kind of an homage to that. The side art, again, if you know who Ernie Barnes is, then this will make a lot more sense of what this artist is trying to replicate. And again, the second wave, I don't know, the box art is pretty the generic one, featuring more of the characters. And so far, you know, we've seen all of these guys popping up. So it's going to be interesting when the next wave, who's going to be featured in the box art. And like always, I leave Hooded Cobra Commander 788 to break these down, because his interpretations are always a lot better than whatever I could come up with. All right, so let's go and crack this thing open and break Stalker free. And here we go with all of Stalker's accessories. We have, I love these weapons, man. This is much more like it. You know, there's his knife, sidearm, his Beretta. You have 2 magazine pieces, actually 3 magazine pieces. This is for the 50 cal. Wow. And you know what? Guess what I'm going to do? Again, thanks to TGC Customs, we're going to get a 6-inch version of his iconic weapon. So if you've been following me over on Instagram and Facebook, you know what I have to say about. I mean, this is supposed to be a modern version of that, which is nice, but what the hell? You know, since I painted this morning, I've been waiting for it. So I'm going to put this on my Stalker just because, you know, I need a little touch up there, you see. But that'll be 2 seconds. But that's going to go with my Stalker. It was just funny saying my Stalker. Anyway, this is Stalker all done up. And look at that. That gun really looks a lot better. I mean, the gun that was included is pretty cool. But just to have, I mean, that just looks really good with his iconic, his mini-me right there. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I am talking about. That looks really cool together. And then, of course, we have to bring him along with his long-range patrol unit buddies. Now, when you read issue number 286, it's important to note that Stalker was the last person to join. The second to last was Storm Shadow, Tommy Arashikage. Snake Eyes, Wage Collins, they were all together pretty much, and he was there to replace their lead, who was died in the last altercation that they had. So Stalker came at the very end to join that unit, and that's cool. That's why issue number 286 is really, really a modern day classic, because it completes the full story that we learned in issue 26 and 27. So we get the full complete story, and I'm just glad Larry Hama had the opportunity to do that, you know. And I know that was important, especially that story arc. That was really important that he kind of tied the knot on that. And I know a lot of people are saying, oh, he goes back and forth between the Gulf War and Vietnam, you know, what is the consistency? Dude, I mean, you kind of have to remember it's a comic book. So there is some leeway as far as like a chronological timeline, you know. But again, this just looks phenomenal. I love his knife. Everything about this figure is amazing. I mean, Hooded Cobra Commander is going to be absolutely through the moon when he sees this. This is a top 5 figure that's come from the classified line already, I can tell you that. And again, that TGC Customs gun just brings that pop to it to bring this thing home completely. Yeah, if you have the ones that are included with it, that's great and all, but this just adds that extra dimension to it. Wow. Again, I'm going to highly recommend going to my full recap for issue number 251 to get a complete picture. This issue really hit home, and I could totally relate to Stalker because in this issue, he talks about how basically his entire life has been fuel for his PTSD. Now, Stalker has seen some shit. Now, like I mentioned, he's essentially Larry Hama's storyteller. Now, think about it. Snake Eyes doesn't talk. Storm Shadow is a freaking ninja. Stalker has a vital role in the Real American Hero arc during the entire lifespan, issue 1 to 300, calling out each movement in the story arc as it makes its way down the chessboard. But we learn in issue 251 that Stalker is paying a heavy price for this quote unquote role. The obvious is PTSD, but just as taxing is survivor's guilt and the acceptance of being okay with death at any moment. This makes him to be a very, very dangerous person because in high stress situation, he is cool as a cucumber and enemies can't scare him with death or anything like that because he's already accepted his fate. So, if you want my recommendation, I would start off with issue number 286, then read issues 26, 27, and then read this issue number 251. And it will totally change your perspective on why Stalker is freaking amazing. Well, that does it with a look at this Stalker classified action figure. Stay tuned. We're going to have the recap for issue number 296 coming up. And again, watch these videos that are actually done by G.I. Joe fans versus these toy people that are just, they're just jumping on board and to get views and stuff like that. We give you history, we give you knowledge. Guys like HCC 788, Timmer from Half the Battle, Joe Motion, 3D Joes, guys that have been a part of this when there was no G.I. Joe content and, it was just like screaming in the dark. So, like, share, and subscribe to not only my channel, but everybody else that is a member of the G.I. Joe community. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.